Kunja Vihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadhari. Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadhari. Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivanadhari. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, which verses? Oh, this is 268, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to start now. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, this afternoon we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavad-gita As It Is, Chapter 2, text number 68. Tasmadyasya mahabaho nigrinhitani sarvasaha indriyartebhyas tasya pragya patistita. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, O mighty armed, one whose senses are restrained from their objects, is certainly of steady intelligence. One can curb the forces of sense gratification only by means of Krishna consciousness, or engaging all the senses in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As enemies are curbed by superior force, the senses can similarly be curbed, not by any human endeavor, but only by keeping them engaged in the service of the Lord. One who has understood this, that only by Krishna consciousness is one really established in intelligence, and that one should practice this art under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, is called sadhaka, or a suitable candidate for liberation. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurim Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukharam Kotivachalam Pungam Hayate Gurim Yatkripatalaham Bhante Shri Gurum Dinataranam Vanchakalpa Tubdischa Kripa Sindhu Devacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaisnavevyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasti Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So Krishna here is letting us know that we have to restrain the senses. And in Kali Yuga, it's very difficult. There's a statement in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kala Kalir Balina Indri Vari Varga Shri Bhakti Marga Yakunta Koti Ruda. That in the age of Kali, the senses are very powerful. And in this age, the path of bhakti is spiked by millions of thorny obstacles. So in this age, yes, the senses are very powerful. And of the senses, the mind is the most difficult to control. The mind is called a subtle sense and is the leader of the other senses. Just like you all know the example, an amazing example in the Bhagavad-gita of the 5 horses depicting the 5 senses, and the mind is the reins, and the intelligence is the driver, the chariot is the body, and the passenger is the soul. When I distribute books, I show this to people. It's one of the most amazing analogies that we have, and it's so nicely put in this painting. And people that I distribute books to, sometimes they buy the book just for that picture, because it really explains a lot. You know, everyone has the experience of the senses coming out of control. You know, like the sight. Just like throughout the world, there's pornography. You know, men want to see the attractive features of a woman, but actually, it's just it's a disturbance to the mind. It causes anxiety and sometimes sinful activity, rape, things like this. So the eyes have to be in control. Better that we engage our eyes in seeing the form of Krishna or reading Prabhupada's books. There's one Greek philosopher who said that we've been given 2 eyes and 1 mouth so that we can read more and speak less. And then he went on to say that we've been given 2 ears to hear more and to speak less. I thought that was kind of interesting. Of course, as devotees, we like to speak about Krishna, but especially in the beginning, it's better to hear and to read. This is a very good way to utilize our eyes in reading the Vedic literatures and seeing the devotees and seeing the deities. This is very good for the eyesight and the sense of hearing. People, they like to hear so much nonsense. They like to go on the news and hear all bad news. News means bad news, pretty much. No good news. In Brazil, they had this one radio channel. It was called the Good News Channel. And it was just good news. No bad news, just good news. But after 6 months, they had to stop because they ran out of good news. Material world, there's a lot of bad news and not that much good news. But in our books, we have a lot of good news. It's all good news, actually. Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad-gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar Devotion. It's all good news. And Prabhupada said that my disciples, they do not want to read these newspapers and watch the news because it's all the same old thing, chewing the chew. You know, there was a natural disaster over there, and this politician said that, and there was a murder over there, and you know, it's just all the same thing going on over and over and over again. So there's no nectar there. But in reading Prabhupada's books, there's so much nectar. And hearing Srila Prabhupada's lectures also, they're so nice. This is all timeless wisdom. You could hear Prabhupada's lectures over and over and over again, and it's inspiring. And we can hear the holy name again and again and again, and it's purifying. It's inspiring. See, this is the nature of transcendental sound vibration. It doesn't get old, and therefore there's some devotees, they chant 64 rounds a day. Even some devotees, they chant 108 rounds a day. It's like inconceivable. Why? Because the holy name of Krishna is not a mundane sound vibration. It's completely transcendental sound vibration that purifies. And it's stated in the Puranas, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Iti Sadasikam Nama, Kali Kamasanathan, Metapracharo, Sarvedesha Drishyate. That if one wants to counteract all the contamination of the age of Kali and become free of sin, then there is no alternative than to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. So this is the power of the holy name of Krishna. Golokera Premadan Harinam Sankirtan. The holy name of Krishna has descended from the spiritual world to deliver the conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya. You know, this is the nature of this world, that people, they're absorbed in Maya, and they're in the clutches. Nobody likes to be in the clutches of anybody. Just like if some big guy comes and grabs one of us and just got us in his clutches, you know, we feel very uncomfortable. We want to get free. So, but we're in the clutches of Maya. And if we're intelligent, we'll want to become free of these clutches and take shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. So there's the eyes, and then there's the ears, and the tongue. The tongue likes to eat so many different types of foodstuffs and also speak so much nonsense. But if we speak about Krishna, then this is very, very purifying, very good. And if we take Krishna prasadam, it's also very purifying. Therefore, it's stated, "Ta Shri Krishna Namadi Namavet Graham Indriya Sevan Mukhi Jiva Da Swayame Visprachida." That one can understand, one cannot understand Krishna with one's blunt material senses. But when Krishna becomes pleased with us by our rendering devotional service, then he reveals himself. See, this is the devotional service is even more powerful than Krishna, because Krishna becomes conquered by devotional service. And Krishna, he likes to get conquered. He likes to be controlled by his devotees. And therefore, to engage in pure devotional service is not an easy thing to achieve, because Krishna, he's controlled by his devotees. So he's not going to be controlled by just anybody. We have to be very pure. And this is the natural position of the soul, is to be pure. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhikavanoi Shravanadi Suchite Korye. That this love for Krishna, it's dormant there in the hearts of all living entities. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhikavanoi Shravanadi Suchite Korye. And this love for Krishna, it's awakened by this hearing, by chanting, by engaging devotional service. The living entity becomes purified. See, when you come into a dirty place, generally, all the time, if you go into a dirty place, you become dirty. So this material world is a dirty place, and therefore practically everybody is very dirty. Consciousness is very dirty, polluted. But Krishna comes. Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes, Lord Nityananda comes. And Krishna sends his pure devotees to help us become clean. Krishna is the most clean. Lord Chaitanya is clean. The Shaktivesh avatars, they're clean. And they come to help us become clean by the association of all these great souls. We take a transcendental shower, cleansing the subtle body, the mind, intelligence, and the ego. We can easily clean our gross body, not a problem. But cleaning the subtle body, that's a big challenge. It's a big challenge. So the mind is the sense that is the most difficult to clean. And therefore Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said that the mind is a non-devotee. It's our enemy, actually. And Krishna says, Udaradatmanatmanam natmanam avasarya maiva hyatmanobanto maiva riparatmanaha. That one has to deliver oneself with the help of the mind, not degrade himself. The mind can be the friend of the living entity and his enemy as well. For one who has conquered the mind is the best friend. And for he who has failed to do, it's the worst enemy. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached. For he has attained tranquility. For him, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor, it's all the same. So if we control the mind, if we can control the mind and engage in the service of Krishna, the mind is our best friend. But if we don't control the mind and just let our senses get out of control, then the mind is our worst enemy. So it's interesting that very close to us is our best friend, the super soul. It's very close to us, right there next to us, always. Doesn't matter what body you're in, super soul is right there, just waiting for us to turn to him and under devotional service. Always our well-wisher. Like Prabhupada would always sign his letters, you're ever a well-wisher. So Krishna, the super soul, is also our ever well-wisher, always thinking of our good, but doesn't interfere with our free will. But as soon as there's some inkling towards God or devotional service, then the super soul makes arrangements. But also very close to us is our worst enemy, the mind, that wants to enjoy sense gratification, doesn't want to engage in devotional service. This is why when we're chanting our japa, the mind is always going here and there. The mind doesn't want to serve Krishna. It wants sense gratification. So we have to keep bringing the mind back. Yato nischalati manaschancham asram tatastato nyamyata atman nivevid samya. That from wherever mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must bring it back under the control of the self. And so, the mind just wants to enjoy the senses. Therefore, the mind is the center of all the other senses, trying to engage the other senses in sense gratification. But there's no happiness in sense gratification. It's frustration. Lada Tapakari, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it stated that whatever we try to enjoy in this world with our senses, that very thing we're trying to enjoy becomes a source of misery. So it's mixed. Lada Tapakari, it's mixed. Some apparent happiness there, then there's misery. Happiness and misery. That's the nature of this world. But Dukkaliya Masasta, mostly it's misery. So the way to become free of this misery, to control the mind, is by engaging in devotional service. Therefore it's stated, Iha yasya harer dasya karmana manasagiro nikilas apivasa so jivan mukto suuchite. That anyone who engages in devotional service with his mind, with his body, and his words, is liberated even within this very lifetime. We don't have to go back to Godhead to be liberated. Even in this lifetime, if we engage our mind in the service of Krishna, we engage our body in the service of Krishna, we engage our words in the service of Krishna, then we're liberated in this lifetime. So this enemy of the senses can be stopped only by the mercy of Krishna, by engaging the senses in devotional service. So Krishna, he purifies our mind, he purifies our senses, so that we just want to engage our senses in the service of Krishna, engage our mind in the service of Krishna. So here also it's stated in the purport, only by Krishna consciousness is one really established in intelligence. Intelligence means to see things in their proper perspective. Prabhupada says this in another purport in the Bhagavad-gita. Intelligence means to see things in their proper perspective. In other words, what is matter, what is spirit, and who the controller of both is. So that's intelligence. Now, some people in this world, they have very high IQs, sometimes even up to 220, high IQ. But if you ask them, my dear sir, who are you? They can't give the right answer. They'll say, well, I'm Joe Smith. professor at University of California, Los Angeles. But if you ask any new bhakta that's been around for a month or two, who are you? He'll tell you, I'm spirit soul, the eternal servant of Krishna. So there's some new bhakta has more intelligence than some person who has a huge IQ. So we're meant to utilize our intelligence in understanding who we are, who Krishna is, the greatness of Krishna. It's like Krishna, he is known as Bhagavan, which means he has 6 opulences. And one of his opulences is very intelligent, knowledge. Krishna has a very high IQ. Can't imagine how high his IQ is. He doesn't make mistakes. Yeah, this is God. In the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says that I know everything that's happened in the past. Vedaham samatityani, vartamanani charjan, vivishyami chabutani, mamta vedana kashtana. I know everything that's happened in the past. Now that's a lot. I mean, what do we know that's happened in the past? Very little. But Krishna, he knows everything that's happened in the past. He knows everything that's happening right now, everywhere, in all the universes, everywhere. He knows everything that's happening right now. And he knows everything that's going to happen in the future. That's a lot. Krishna is very intelligent. But sometimes we come across these people who say that they're God. Some of you might have met such people. I've met one person like that in the airport in Los Angeles. So I was speaking to him, and so I asked him, so what kind of work do you do? He said, well, I'm God. I said, oh, you have a very big position. You have a very big position there. And I said, well, one of the characteristics of God is that he knows everything. Can you tell me what I'm thinking? He said, yes, you're thinking I'm a rascal. So I said, oh, you're very intelligent. You're right. But I was also thinking of a number. Can you tell me that number? No. So, yeah, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said this material world is made up of the cheaters and the cheated. Some people, they want to cheat. And some, they want to be cheated. So Prabhupada said, when I came here, I did not come here to cheat you. Like so many swamis came and they were just cheating their disciples. So many of them fell down with their female disciples. Excuse me. But not Prabhupada. Although his lady disciples had so much love for him. There's one nice pastime of Prabhupada in India. Prabhupada was at one temple with some other disciples, maybe about 20 disciples. And they got different rooms, and Prabhupada had his own room, and ladies had a room next to him. And there was a balcony. Prabhupada had a balcony outside his room. And there was also a balcony outside the ladies' room. And Prabhupada was out on the balcony chanting japa. And one of the ladies was also outside on the balcony there chanting japa. And her name was Yamuna Devi, the famous singer of Govinda prayers, who was very dear to Srila Prabhupada. So she was chanting, and then she looked over to Prabhupada and said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I love you. And Prabhupada said, I know. And then he walked back into his room. Prabhupada's so cool, yeah. So yeah, everybody had so much love for Srila Prabhupada. There's one nice pastime of Giriraj Maharaj. At the time, he was a brahmachari. This is back in 1970, I think. So in 1970, Prabhupada, he called for many of his disciples to go to India because he was going to start the preaching in India. So about 30 devotees from around America and Europe, they went to India, and one of them was Giriraj, brahmachari at the time. Now, he was the only son of a very wealthy businessman. So it was very disturbing for him that Giriraj is in India. So he went to India with the idea of bringing his son back to America. So Giriraj, he got the information, flight information, picked him up at the airport and his mother. And immediately his father was trying to convince him to go back to America. Well, why do you want to stay in India? It's a third world country. It's so dirty. He said, no, I like it here. I want to stay. So he thought maybe he can get the sympathy of Prabhupada, Giriraj's spiritual master. So he asked him to arrange a meeting. So they had a meeting. It was Prabhupada and Giriraj and his parents, and the servant was there as well. And the father said, this disciple of yours, our son, he's our only son, and we're very attached to him. And it's very difficult for us that he's living here so far away in India. So do you think you could send him back to America? So Prabhupada looked at Giriraj and said, would you like to go back to America? And Giriraj said, no, Prabhupada, I want to stay here with you. So Prabhupada looked at his parents and said, what do you want me to do? You don't want me to force him, do you? And they said, no. So Prabhupada said, well, why don't you, Giriraj, take your parents to the foothills of the Himalayas, to Nepal, and spend some time with them. They have nice resorts there. Yeah, Giriraj said, yes, I can do that. So they did that. They went and they spent about a week in Nepal. And while they were there, Giriraj could see that this would be a great place for a temple in Kathmandu. So they spent a week there, and then they went back to Bombay. And they were happy. The parents were very happy. They spent some time with their son. And he said that he would be visiting again, not too far in the future. So they were happy with all that. And Giriraj wanted them to spend a little more time with Prabhupada because any association with Prabhupada is golden opportunity. So the parents were there with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada wasn't preaching. Sometimes preaching means just being friendly. Just like there's a verse in the Bhagavad-gita, the austerity of speech. Anudvegam krang vakyam satyam priyam hitamsya sudyam yasanam chaiva vanmayam tapa uchate. That one should speak that which is not agitating. Sometimes when you preach too much, it can be a little bit of a little bit too much, and people can't appreciate. So knowing what to say and what not to say is an austerity of the speech. To speak that which is not agitating to others, anudvegam satyam, to speak that which is truthful, to speak that which is pleasing, to speak that which is beneficial, and to always repeat the Vedic literatures. These are the 5 austerities of speech. So Prabhupada was expert at preaching. And he was just talking to them, just small talk, joking about differences between America and India. And they were very happy with their time with Prabhupada. And when they left, they were very happy. And after everybody left, it was just Prabhupada and the servant in the room. And the servant said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, you amaze me. Everybody loves you so much. And Prabhupada replied, that's because I love everyone so much. So this is why this movement spread all over the world in a very short time, because Prabhupada's love for all living entities. So this is our great fortune that we can associate with Srila Prabhupada in the most pleasing way by reading his books. And by reading his books, we become intelligent. There's a saying, Prabhupada said that there's something called lazy intelligence, active intelligence, a lazy fool, and active fool. So the lazy intelligence is the most intelligent person. And Prabhupada gave the example of a high court judge. He just sits down at a desk and is paid so much money for talking, for coming up with cases and finding out what's the best thing for a certain case. So he just sits there, gets paid so much money. Lazy intelligence. And the Brahmana is compared to the lazy intelligence. He sits and he speaks. He speaks the Vedic literatures. He speaks the knowledge coming from Krishna. It's like Prabhupada. How did he spread this movement all over the world? He was in 26 Second Avenue, right there, New York, Big Apple. And he was just sitting and speaking, sitting and chanting. And from that, sitting and speaking, so many people became attracted. And then he went to Montreal and he sat and he spoke. He went to San Francisco and he sat and he spoke. And wherever he went, he sat and he spoke. Or on his morning walks, he walked and he spoke. But from that, thousands and thousands of people became devotees of Krishna, gave up their sinful activities from hearing a very intelligent person speak. Then the active intelligence, he's the administrator or the kshatriya. He follows the instructions of the Brahmana, but he's active. So he's also intelligent, but he can't just sit and speak. He's more active, more passionate. So that's the Brahmana, active intelligence. And then the lazy fool is the Vaishya. He's a businessman. He also sits at his desk and he figures out how to make a lot of money. And then he has his workers, and that's the active fool. They have to work. There are so many laborers all over the world. They're working for the boss, the lazy or the lazy fool. So the best thing, Prabhupada wanted to make lazy, intelligent people, brahmanas, because there's enough fools, enough lazy fools and active fools, and not very many even intelligent, active people, kshatriyas. But practically no brahmanas. So he wanted to make a class of brahmanas who can lead society, who can give people transcendental knowledge by which they can get purified. So we have to control these senses. This is another way of showing intelligence, is controlling the senses. Just like there's a statement by Rupa Goswami, Kamarinam katina katita pavita dorni desas tesam jata mahin nana prot. That for so long I've been the humble, menial servant of many bad masters. And what are those masters? Lust, anger, greed, envy, illusion. And these masters have not shown any mercy to me. Generally, when you serve a master, you get something favorable in return. They've never shown mercy to me. I've never been ashamed of serving them. I never wanted to give up serving them. But now, my dear Lord Krishna, you've given me transcendental intelligence. So I no longer want to serve these bad masters. Now I just want to serve you. Now I just want to serve you. So this is how we should live our life. Serving Krishna, not being slaves to our senses, servants to our senses, because we do that, then we just go back again into the cycle of birth and death. Prabhupada said this is the greatest fear of a devotee, is to again enter into the cycle of birth and death, samsara. So actually today is a special day. Today is the appearance day of a great Shaktiveshavatar who, because of his mercy, we're all sitting, hearing, and speaking about Krishna. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it's his appearance day. Very auspicious day. So I thought I'd say something about this great Acharya. So he took birth on September 2nd, 1838. Very auspicious day for the residents of this world. No one would have known there was such a special day. But yes, very special day. And he, I'm going to fast forward so we don't have much time. He, upon reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, was convinced that Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he was preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya. In 1871, I guess he was about 33 at that time, he wrote about Haridas Thakur, who I think his appearance day is coming up soon, or disappearance day soon. Now, beautiful, he wrote a beautiful poem about Haridas Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was amazing in his writing abilities. He wrote 100 books and so many songs, beautiful, wonderful songs. Like we sing every day, Jaya Radha Madhava, that came from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So many songs, Yasomati Nandana, so many. He was just so empowered preacher. Excuse me. So he is, in his prayer to Haridas Thakur, he said, He reasons ill who say that Vaishnavas die while still living in sound. The Vaishnavas die to live, and living spread the holy name around. We all are familiar with this little stanza from this poem. That was in glorification of Haridas Thakur. And then in the same year, he wrote another beautiful poem that I know some of it. That he says, the flesh is not my own, alas. The mortal frame, a chain. The soul confined for former wrongs should try to rise again. Why then this childish play and that which is not my own, which falls within 100 years as if a rose blown? Forget the past that sleeps, nor the future dream at all. Live in times that are with thee, and progress thee shall call. So push on thy march, O soul, against an evil deed that stands with lust and hate. A hero be indeed. Maintain thy post, O soul, as firmly as you can. Let matter not push thee down. O stand, heroic man. So these are some of the beautiful stanzas from this poem that I memorized. He's just so amazing, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So in 1871, he moved to Jagannath Puri, where he was a magistrate. He was a high court judge. And he was also put in charge of the Jagannath temple there in Jagannath Puri, the big temple. So after some time, he found out that the king, who was there at the time, he was stealing from the treasury of the temple, something like 80,000 rupees, which back then was a lot of money. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he came to hear about this, and he punished him. See, back then, even now, there's a king of Puri, but he has no jurisdiction. You know, there's others. It's just like a post, a stamp. You just stamp. King doesn't have no power. So this is just like now, it was back then. The British were in charge at that time. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, upon hearing about this, he punished the king by forcing him to pay for the 52 offerings a day to Jagannath. Every day there's 52 offerings. So he had to pay for that for some time. But it didn't take long for him to lose all his money. The king practically lost everything. So he was very upset about this. So he hired somehow he had enough to hire some pundits, 50 pundits. And he wanted them to chant mantras for the death of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And after 30 days of these pundits chanting mantras for the death, see, so-called brahmanas, right? For the death of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, after 30 days, Bhaktivinoda Thakur didn't die, but the king's only son died on that day. So don't mess with Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Another thing that happened in Jagannath Puri while he was there was one yogi named Visakhasen, and he was claiming to be Mahavishnu. And he had some mystic abilities. There would be a fire in front of him, and he'd put his head in the fire and come out untouched, not harmed. He'd put his head completely in the fire, come back. That's pretty good trick, right? And he would heal people that were ill and had problems, and and he would shake his head. He had these locks of hair, and he would shake his head, and sparks would fly from his locks of hair. So he had some mystical yogic abilities, but he was also exploiting the women, and he would even sometimes have illicit affairs with the women. And many of the men, senior men there, they became very upset, and they went to the authorities and said, what's going on with this nonsense. So it eventually came to the attention of the British government, and they knew of the power of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. They knew he was a Vaishnava, and they knew that he was also very powerful, and that's why they had him as a high court judge. He was very pure, very respected, and powerful. So they asked him to deal with this problem. The British, what are they going to do? So Bhaktivinoda Thakur went to where he was. He was out in the jungle. So Bhaktivinoda went there, and he had about 1,000 followers around him, and they were all praising him, saying that he's Mahavishnu. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur went there, and immediately his Visakha Sen said, "Oh, Thakur, I know who you are. I know your family. I know everything about you. I know that you have soldiers or you have police in the surrounding area here in the jungle. I know what you want to do, but don't try to interfere with what I'm doing. I'm going to conquer the British. We're going to drive the British out of India, and I'll make you a governor of Orissa. Don't try to get in my way. I'm the Supreme Lord." So Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, "Well, if you're the Supreme Lord, then why are you out here in the jungle? Why don't you go to Jagannath Puri and take darshan of Lord Jagannath?" And Visakha Sen said, Jagannath, that's just a lump of wood. I'm the Supreme Lord, Mahavishnu." Now, as soon as Bhaktivinoda Thakur heard that, he became like fire, and he told his policemen, take him. But the policemen, they were afraid, because they could see he had some amazing yogic power. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he wasn't intimidated at all. He knew it's just he has some mystic abilities, so what? So he told the policeman, "Go and get a bullock cart from one of the nearby villages." So they did that. And while they were getting the bullock cart, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was preaching to him. Don't think that you're the Supreme Lord. You're just another living entity. The Supreme Lord, he creates universes. You don't create any universe. What can you do? You should be humble. So, but of course he was proud. He wouldn't accept. So then the bullock cart came, and the Visakha Sen, he said, "You can't take me. I'm the Supreme Lord." And then, so Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he told the policeman, "You can get him, take him, put him on the cart." They were still afraid. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself went and got some others, and they put him on the cart. He said, "Oh, I don't have to go, but I'll go because Bhaktivinoda, you're my devotee, so I don't want my devotee to say anything that is untrue. You're saying that this, all right, I'll accept this because you're my devotee." So it's very, very strange. So then they took him to court, and it took some time. And while he was in court, the family members of Bhaktivinoda Thakur became very ill. And when it came time for the decision, Bhaktivinoda Thakur also became very ill. Everybody was ill. And the wife said, "He's the Supreme Lord Vishnu. We're all going to die because we're offending him." She didn't know. He said, no, he's a rascal. And even if we all have to die to get justice, to stop this rascal, then let it be. The Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he had such incredible integrity, just amazing integrity. He's ready to die to see this rascal be brought to justice. So they had to actually carry Bhaktivinoda Thakur in a palanquin to court to make his judgment because he was so ill. So he was on the seat there in the courtroom, and he made his judgment that he is guilty and he has to go to jail. I forgot, I think the amount of time was 2 years, if I'm not wrong. But while he was there in the courtroom, one British security person, I don't remember exactly what he was, but anyway, he knew that some yogis, they keep their powers in their hair, in their locks of hair. So he had a big pair of scissors, and it's described, he kind of jumped on and he cut off his locks of hair, and immediately he became weak. He lost his potency, his shakti. And when there was thousands of people outside the courtroom because they were thinking he's the Supreme Lord, and they were protesting that God is being put on trial. So when they heard that when his hair was cut off, he became weak and lost all his power, they all lost faith and left him. And then 6 months later, I think it was that or 3 months, and he committed suicide, took poison. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was so powerful, extremely powerful personality. And it's described that at the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, people around Navadvip thought that Lord Chaitanya's appearance place was in Navadvip. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he heard from senior devotees and also from writings that he didn't appear in Navadvip, that he had appeared elsewhere, whereas now is Mayapur. So he heard this from very senior Vaishnavas, and it was also in writings. So he went there and found that in the area where Lord Chaitanya actually appeared, it's covered with tulsi leaves. And he wanted to get it confirmed by Jagannath Das Babaji that this was the place. So he told Jagannath Das Babaji that he thinks that he had found the actual place where Lord Chaitanya appeared. So he was brought there by his servants. Jagannath Das Babaji, at that time, he was 120 years old. So he was carried in a basket by his servant. But when he got in the area where the tulsi leaves were, the tulsi plants were, and where it is said that Lord Chaitanya appeared, he jumped out of the basket and he said, "This is the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of Nimai Pandit. This is the birth site. This is where he appeared." So then it's described that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he started doing a lot of preaching. And I'm sure you've heard of these namhats. So that started actually with Lord Nityananda when he was here. And then Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he picked it up again. And it's described that he had 500 namhats, thousands of devotees from this namhat program. It was increasing and increasing all over that eastern part of India. And he started something called the Marketplace of the Holy Name. And there was 20 employees in this marketplace. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was he wanted to be the sweeper in the marketplace to keep the market clean. Very humble, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And actually he says that when will I with a humble heart go out to spread the holy name of Krishna? So Bhaktivinoda Thakur's humility is just overwhelming. In many of his songs, in this one song, Gopinath, he expresses his humility. He's very, very humble Vaishnava. And it's described that the day after his retirement, at 56, he went door to door to collect for a temple at the birth site of Lord Chaitanya. Again, you see the humility. He was even going to the door of people who were inimical towards him. And he would ask everybody, give 1 rupee. Of course, again, 1 rupee back then, it was more than 1 rupee now, like, I don't know, 3 cents or something, maybe even less. But he was able to build the temple that's still there at the birth site of Lord Chaitanya by his going around and collecting donations from people all around that area, Navadvip, Mayapur area. And he predicted that people from America, Europe, China, Russia, Africa would come together in Mayapur and chant Jaya Sachinandana, Jaya Sachinandana, Jaya Sachinandana Gaura Hari. So now it's happened. He gave that prediction. And he also predicted that a person would go to the West and they would spread the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And of course, that was our dear Srila Prabhupada. Another amazing thing in the life of Bhaktivinoda Thakur is that he prayed to Krishna for a ray of Vishnu. And that, of course, was Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who memorized the Gita at the age of 7 and could speak on it, and who just did amazing things. There was 64 temples. The Gaudiya Math was the biggest spiritual movement in India when it was in its heyday. 64 temples. And he was very fond of book distribution, and therefore he called it the Brihat Mardanga. And there was one temple where in the temple room he had the printing press. And he knew that Krishna would be pleased to hear the printing of the books, because that meant that the message was being printed and to be distributed. So in 1908, Bhaktivinoda Thakur took Babaji initiation from Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji. Now, you know, Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji, he was the spiritual master of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So he was also the spiritual master of Bhaktivinoda Thakur with his Babaji initiation. So he accepted many disciples from that time on, within a short period. But then in 1910, he fully absorbed himself in the spiritual plane in the Bhakti Bhavan in Jagannath Puri. He just went into seclusion, samadhi, just absorbed himself in hearing the holy names of Krishna. So that is Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this very exalted Vaishnava. So, is there any question or comment that anyone may have about anything I've said?
Just to clarify, Prabhu, so Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but in the parampara, like in the parampara list in the Bhagavad-gita, it says like Jagannath Das Babaji is before Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So was that?
Well, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he also was a disciple of Jagannath Das Babaji. So, which is actually, he had another spiritual master too. I forgot his name, but he wasn't a what do you call it? A strict Vaishnava. So therefore, he took shiksha from Jagannath Das Babaji. So yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, but because Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he is, of course, senior to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is junior to Gorkshore Das Babaji. Therefore, it's like that. Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Gorkshore Das Babaji, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, like that, and then Jagannath Das Babaji.
And what is like Babaji initiation?
You know, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he gave about 40 people Babaji initiation, which means that they're senior, old, and they pretty much just go into chanting Hare Krishna. Yeah. Prabhupada gave one. Because this person, he was also, this person had cancer, disciple of Prabhupada. And he asked Prabhupada to be given Babaji initiation because he's got cancer. He's I'll just go to Radhakund and chant and go back to Godhead. Can you give me Babaji? And Prabhupada said, all right. So he gave him Babaji initiation. But then it turned out that he didn't have cancer. So he gave up Krishna consciousness and just left. So no more Babaji initiations from Prabhupada.
If anyone else has questions, you can unmute yourself. If not, maybe I can just ask. So, like you mentioned, that sometimes preaching means being friendly. So, can you expand on that? Like, so that because it seems like relevant. You said that Prabhupada, when Prabhupada was preaching to Giriraj Swami's parents, and you said that sometimes preaching means just being friendly.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah. Well, sometimes just being nice and friendly and hearing, people are very impressed. And sometimes people aren't ready to hear the philosophy. Like you could see his parents were, they were pretty upset that his son had, on the other side of the planet. I mean, that's pretty far away. And he's a Hare Krishna. So he just wanted to befriend them. And it was perfect because they appreciated, Prabhupada. He's such a gentleman. He's such an aristocratic gentleman. So they appreciated, they strongly felt that their son was in good hands. So he wanted to get that message to them. And I'm sure Giriraj Maharaj, he sent them many books and had the opportunity to hear the philosophy. But Prabhupada just thought that was the best thing for time, place, and circumstance. Okay. If there's no other question, we could just chant. Maybe you could chant. My throat's a little.
Yeah, maybe as we don't have like other kirtanis, so we can just wrap up, and that's
Okay.
fine. But we can maybe everyone can join me in expressing appreciation to Vijay Prabhu for giving such a beautiful talk. So Vijay Prabhu, okay.
Thank
So
you.
beautiful stories.